Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Today, I'm really excited about this guest. The reason that I know about this guest is because I work for the Prime Life Project and Daniel James had him on his podcast. And I'm going to be honest, it was the best podcast Daniel's ever done, I think I've ever been involved in. And I include this to Joe Rogan's podcast. It's the best podcast I've ever listened to because it punched me in the face, it punched me in the stomach, it kept hitting me with knowledge bombs. Absolutely loved it. And I'm so excited to get this guest on. So welcome, Paul Cope. Yeah!
What an intro, Jesus. It'd be hard to live up to that, isn't it?
We go through it on this bus, baby. It's the Wenger bus. So how you doing, my friend? It's so good to see you again. It's been a couple of months.
Yeah, it's a couple of months since Dan's, yeah.
I saw you, but you didn't see me. I was the background.
No, I only had your voice. So I recognise you by your voice more than your face.
You're like, who's that Joe Pasquale-esque character? So the book, Paul, I've already said before the podcast, I always mispronounce it. I say it in the wrong order. What's the book called, mate?
It's called How to Solve Any Problem in Life.
Wow. Now, big statement, chap. I've seen the book. My friends who watch the podcast have got a copy. I've not got my copy yet. I swear on my life I'm getting a copy, but I listened to the podcast. So I thought I've got the gist. But it's a meaty book, very chunky.
It is.
It must be packed with information. Could you sort of give me a bit of a breakdown of this book and what led you to write a book?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's always hard to sum up because, as you say, it's pretty big. It's pretty big. It's like it's 160,000 words and 650 pages for the listener or whoever's watching this, which makes it like a chunk. And even as I was writing it, because when you're writing it, I'm just writing it in like Microsoft Word, and then I sent it to like a mate of mine who's an ex-journalist who does editing, and he edited. And the very first few people, I think even Dan, when I've said to him, he was like, do you realize how big this book is? And in my head, I was just like, it's just what I've got in my head, inside my head. I'm just getting out whatever's in my head. So it wasn't until I got the first printed copy, I was like, wow, it's like a brick. And I always say to people, so it's great because if you decide to invest in it and you're not sure about it, it serves multiple purposes. So it's actually loads of value for money. Because if you get it as a book and you don't like the book, you can use it as something to hold doors open with. You can use it as a weapon. You can use it as a weight to do fitness workouts with. But the very brief backstory is I used to be. I often talk about my old life and my new life. In my old life, I was a corporate lawyer, worked for some of the biggest and most prestigious law firms in the world. Set up my own law firm when I was 29. Grew it. Was successful, had some amazing clients, had a lovely flash office. Got to a point in my life where I had that. I had a beautiful wife. I had this amazing city centre apartment. I drove a flash car. I owned multiple investment properties. I had started a new company, an online company, which I'd like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank for any American listeners. I'd got like a huge 350 grand investment in, which at the time people were like, this is going to go into the stratosphere. This is a multi-million-pound company. And at that point in my life, so to the outside world, the way I always describe it is my mum and dad like go to the church club on a Saturday night with their mates, with Barbara and Eddie, and they have a chat. At the point when they were most proud of me, and the rest of the world would be like, oh my God, Paul is absolutely nailing it. At that height, to the outside world, I was at my lowest. So I was depressed. I always go to call it suicidal, but it wasn't traditional suicidal because my dad growing up, and this ties into loads of the work I do about the stories we tell ourselves and who we are and our identities. So even when it came to wanting to kill myself, stories that I had from growing up, my dad used to work in the insurance profession. So I knew that if you kill yourself, your insurance doesn't pay out. And I had loads of chronic illnesses in my old life. So I had really high insurance. It cost me a lot of money. And I was insured for a lot of money because I had lots of debt and stuff that I'd used to build businesses. And so my insurance was worth like £1 million or something. And I was like, well, if I kill myself, that just falls away. So I used to sit and plan how I could die without it looking like suicide. So I would sit in my beautiful Flash City Centre office on a Sunday afternoon with wine or Jack Daniels, which was bad enough in itself looking back. And I'd go through like scenarios of, well, I could get someone to shoot me, but what if that went wrong? You could get someone to run you over in a car, but what if they cocked up and you ended up with brain damage and you didn't die? And that was the low I was at. It was just like, I want out. And at that point I was like, right, there's got to be a better way. And I talked about this in a podcast of my own last year in the middle of lockdown, because I hate the way most people talk about suicide and depression. I just think most people have got no idea what they're talking about. If they've never experienced either suicidal thoughts or depression, or they're not experts in it, my big thing is keep your nose out. It's got nothing to do with you. But what I say to people now is, there's nothing, this ties into the work as well, there's nothing wrong with feeling depressed and suicidal. It's just actually a very normal human feeling to have. But my big thing is, right, if that's the point you've got to, and this is where I got to, make that your thousandth option on the list, and write a list of all the things you could do before you get to number 1,000 that might make your life better. Because if you've got to the point where you're going to kill yourself, well, actually, what if one of the things that's making you want to kill yourself is the business you run? Do you think it's more damaging to just close that business or actually kill yourself? And when you can put it into sort of terms like that, you're like, yeah, I'll just close the business then. So I started to just rip my life apart, basically. This is just over 3 years ago now. Rip my life apart. Best decision I ever made. Started seeing a therapist. Then started working with coaches. One coach in New York, one coach in England. And just loved it. Like, consumed this new stuff. Started to learn all about how humans work, how our systems operate. Stuff that I shared on Dan's podcast that you were talking about before blew my mind, which is why when I share it, blows other people's minds. And it just completely changed my life. And I became obsessed with it. I started going down loads of rabbit holes, learning from all parts of the globe. Completely, literally sold everything I had. Sold my company, closed down the online business, sold all the houses, left my marriage, sold all the possessions I had, was left with 2 bags of clothes and 2 boxes of books. Put the 2 boxes of books and 1 bag of clothes in my mum and dad's loft, and took 1 bag of clothes with me and went to Bali, and spent 3 months in Bali meeting incredible people. And that was the start of all this. And so from there, basically just completely changed my life, completely changed who I am internally, understood. What I realized was all of my problems in life were all like symptoms for surface level stuff. So whether it was problems in my relationship, problems in my business, problems with money, health problems, when I traced everything down, even as a lawyer, I was all about finding the root causes of problems rather than treating the symptoms, which we live in a world where everyone loves to treat symptoms. And I'd find the root causes. And one day, I can still vividly remember it. I was walking through the park, walking my dog, and it was like I got hit by lightning. I was just like, oh my God, all of my problems trace back to low self-esteem, like how I feel about myself inside. I don't feel good enough. And whenever I say that to anyone from my old life, they're all like, even my mum is like, that's nonsense. Like, I was one of the most confident people you could ever meet on the outside. But what I realized was I'd created this persona to face the world. Whereas deep inside, what was actually happening was I didn't think I was good enough. I was trying to prove myself constantly to myself and to everybody else. And when I started working on that thing, everything else in my life just got better. Like addictions, I used to be a big drinker. I used to be addicted to work, late, long hours. All of these things just faded away. Chronic health problems started to fade away. Relationships improved. And I got to a point where I was like, right, and it was the start of lockdown, actually. I have learned all this stuff. And something I often say is, I love superhero movies. The book is full of superhero movie analogies. I love movies anyway, because I like to sort of pass things on to people in a way that I think people will understand. So I always say, I think if I've got a superpower, which I wish it was that I could fly or shoot laser beams out my eyes, but it's not that cool. But if I've got anything, it's the ability to take in loads of information, complex information sometimes, and then just distill it into a way that other people understand. I used to be able to do it as a lawyer. I could sit in the middle of a new deal, take in loads of stuff and then just go to people, right, so what we actually mean is this, this, and this. And they'd be like, yes. I'm like, oh, okay. In this world, that's actually really powerful because I can take in all this stuff and then to say to somebody, do you know the Incredible Hulk? And they go, yeah. And I go, right, this story ties into how you feel inside. And all of a sudden people are like, yeah, I get that now. God, I've never thought of it like that before. So what I realized was I wanted to start helping other people and seeing if the way I interpret this stuff could help. So I started coaching people all around the world, clients in Singapore, Sydney, Miami, Dubai, England, and the stuff they were doing was having the same impact on their life as it had on mine. And then I got to a point where it was like, right, I can only coach so many people. So how can I get this out to more people? And I wrote the book and started a YouTube channel and a podcast because my big thing now is I, as you can tell the way I talk about it, like I'm so passionate about this stuff. I just feel like more people need to have access to it for as low a cost as possible. And that's why I wrote the book ultimately.
Wow. I mean, that's it, folks. You now, yeah, this is the man. Just go and watch all his stuff. You'll be fine. So, it's just froze on my input. Oh no, it's all good now. We're back. I mean, I am going to have to sift through this story then, because I've heard it on Dan's podcast, but there was other elements. You know, when you're sitting behind the camera, it's great because you're there and you're asking these questions. Being behind my cameras filming him, I'm going, oh, try this, ask him that. And I'm just getting so excited. So I love that I've got this opportunity now. But what were you like as a kid in a thought? Because hearing you being at this moment where mum and dad, people in your friendship circles were just thinking, Paul is absolutely smashing it, killing it, look at him go. And they've all got this perception of you and you're really, really struggling. Were you a kid that suffered with a lot of depression? Did you have these sort of tendencies of low self-esteem throughout childhood and onwards? Or did it sort of just happen to you?
It's a really good question. So I was, and again, especially in my old life, people wouldn't believe this. I was a very, very quiet kid, very shy, wouldn't speak. And I've said that short line in front of friends of mine who I've been mates with since I was 18, university friends and stuff. I said it a few years ago. I can still picture being in my mate's kitchen in London and saying that. I just said it that quite casually. And two of my mates turned to me and went, oh, I should have checked. Am I okay to swear on your podcast?
Always, yeah, go for it.
So two of my mates turned to me and went, oh, fuck off. As if you were ever shy. And I was like, I was. And not only I am. Like, I am actually an introvert. I'm an introvert who's learned how to be an extrovert. So when I'm being extroverted, it takes up loads of energy. And I hear now, as the world's progressing and more people talk about this stuff, I hear loads of people talking like this. People who we look at from the outside world and we assume they're extroverts. What they actually are is introverts who've learned how to perform. And what that means is when you're not seeing them, the batteries have run really low. So to go back to the question, I was a really shy, really quiet kid. I had a big sister who was 2 years older than me. She was very loud and she used to sing and dance, and I used to let her speak for me. I couldn't even speak properly when I was a little kid because she would speak for me. And I was naturally very creative, very artistic. I used to love drawing. I used to love magic, which ties into the book and the stories in the book. And when I look back at that was a part of me that in a different environment would have flourished. But actually the world I then moved into, I was born into a very loud family in a very loud city in a very loud society. So what happens to all of us, and this is a huge part of the work I do, is we start to adapt subconsciously over time. So just gently over time, I became less and less the shy, introverted character and developed more and more of this loud, extroverted character. So it's a really interesting question. Did I have low self-esteem when I was a kid? Something that I talk about loads is the labels we put on things. So I was shy as a kid. People would all acknowledge I was shy. But actually, if you look up the definition of shy, it's closely linked to being insecure. But no one would have described me as being insecure as a child. We don't describe 3-year-old children as insecure. We describe them as shy. But actually, I always had this level of fear and anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety in my family, which I would never have known before doing a lot of this work. And that was just built on over the time. But the way it was masked was I was brilliant at creating this other character and other characters that you wouldn't have been able to see. No one from my old life would have known any of this stuff, including me.
So during that time of being a young person, what do you think could have been bettered or to help you on your journey and not to get to this critical point? How do you think you could have been treated, or it could have been picked up by friends, family, teachers, close ones?
I don't know, another great question. And it's ultimately the solution to all of this. Like, how we change the world is the answer to that question. And it's worth saying as well, this is not me saying I had a terrible childhood. Quite the opposite. I had a lovely childhood on paper. You know, the way we raise kids in the society we're in. Lovely mum and dad, lovely home. Went on holiday once a year. Had everything I could want. Wasn't particularly spoiled, but didn't want for anything. The problem is, I talk about humanity as like a car production line. So we've got this production line that when we're born, we get put onto, and then picture one of those big factories with it's got like a conveyor belt in the middle, and the car chassis goes down the conveyor belt. It's got all these robots and people adding things to it. So it starts out this little chassis, and then by the end, it's a shiny car with wheels and a steering wheel and doors. That's what being a human is like. We get built as we go along. The problem is the people who work in the factory were built by the people who used to work in the factory. And we all build cars in the same way, in this analogy, humans. And we just build them the way we were built because we just assume that's the way you build humans. The problem is, if it was cars, what happens to every human pretty much is you get to like a certain age in life, and it's a different age for different people. But imagine the car with a car. It's like a car. Every car that came out of one factory gets to 40,000 miles and then breaks down. If that happened with a car factory, we would go back to the factory and say, there's something wrong. We need to fix what we're doing in the factory. We're not building these cars properly. But with humans, we don't do that at all. We just go, well, all the humans are broken. They all break in the same way. That's just the way it is. And then the humans that are broken go and work in the factory. And then they go and start building new humans. And then those humans are built with the same faults and the same flaws.
And
then they get to the same point.
Other ones by accident may be introduced because of that constant fault, and then you're just getting fault on fault. Mate, exactly. That's such a good analogy.
And it goes back through the generations. So what this work is all about is, and this is where I have to stretch the analogy. It's more like we're talking about transformers then, not cars. So a car at the end stands up and becomes a transformer and goes, hang on. And every now and then people like me come along, and you and other people who don't want to just accept the way it is. And we make changes, and then we go back into the factory and we say to everyone, look, if you want to change how this happens, we need to start changing how we build the humans from the start. And the big thing is, the thing that can change for everybody is just allowing everybody to be who they're meant to be, to express all of their emotions, to never have to change to fit into the society in which you're built into. And one big part of that for me, and this is something that I do that's completely different to loads of the personal development and self-help worlds. Most of those worlds I've realized, I used to love them, but most of them actually build on top of the problems we already have. So they don't treat the root cause. They get you to be positive all the time, and they get you to be more driven. And if you get more money, you'll be happier. And it's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. What this work does is go, no. One of the things we were taught as kids is it's not okay to feel certain ways. So, for example, being shy. People would say, don't be shy.
Yeah.
There's no shy. And it's well-intentioned. There's no malice in that. People think it's a good thing to do. What they're actually saying to a child deep inside, the message you get is, it's not okay for me to be shy. But I know I'm shy. So the message I get is, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough as I am. I can't just be me. I can't just be shy. So I have to create this persona then. And everyone goes, we love you when you're like this. We love you when you're extroverted and happy. And you go, okay, then I need to be extroverted and happy all the time. And then we build this, in the world we're in now, we build these like huge Instagram machines and things where it's like, everybody be happy all the time. Guess what? You turn the camera off and you go and sit in your own room and you go, I'm not happy though. And then you think, what? I'm not good enough. It must just be me. There's something wrong with me. And that goes from when we're little kids right up to, I was chatting to a 75-year-old man yesterday who has all these problems in his life. And so the solution is we go back to the beginning. Well, the first solution is we start with us. Because I've read books, and there's a great book by a lady called Philippa Perry on, it's called something like the book you wish your parents had read. And it's how you allow your kids to feel their own emotions. The challenge with that is, if you've never done the work yourself, allowing and creating the space for somebody else to feel their emotions is really tough, because you bring it back to you all the time. So, and that's why for me, there's no blame to parents at all, especially in my life. I look back, if anyone's listening to this and is thinking about their own parents, if you want to like find a way to be compassionate to your own parents, if you feel like they did you any damage, speak to them about their parents, and then ask them about their grandparents. And what you tend to see is, if you start asking the question, well, and look, there was nothing bad done to me really when I was a kid. You know, the stuff I'm talking about is stuff that everybody experiences. But if you want to question why your parents raised you the way they did, ask how they were raised, and then ask how their parents were raised. And what you tend to find is, at each generation, it got slightly better. But if your reference point, so I've got stories even within my own family, if you go back, of people punching children in the face. So if so like my great nan punched my great nan in the face when she was a kid. That was just part of the way they lived. Now, if you got punched in the face by your parents as a kid, when you raise your child, if you just verbally abuse them, you think you're doing a good job, because you go, well, I got punched in the face. You don't get punched in the face. But then if you verbally abused your child, you were verbally abused by your parents, and you go, well, I'm not going to verbally abuse my kids. So you don't verbally abuse them, but then there's something else subconscious in there that you're doing. You're not allowing them to feel their emotions. It just passes down. Does that all make sense?
Mate, again, I knew it was going to be great, but I didn't know how great. So many penny drop moments in that for me. The one thing I took as well from there is how important your story is, because a big commonality with a lot of people is, I've had a really rough upbringing. It's really very obvious where the pain, where the low self-esteem, all the negative habits have sort of transcended from. It makes a lot of sense. And that's pretty much in my story. I've acknowledged the root cause to the best I can. I've seen it, but I don't want to stay in the victim mindset anymore. So I'm going, no, I get that. But how was she raised? How did this happen? How did it come through? But I've had a lot of conversations recently with people that have had that archetypal family lifestyle upbringing, really beautiful existence. Have you seen the film Pleasantville?
No.
Oh, dude, that's for you tonight.
Want to add to my list, yeah.
Oh, dude,
awesome.
It's brilliant, but everything's pleasant and really beautiful. I'll tell you later about it. It's in black and white, and then every time something a bit crazy's happened in society or art's added, there's color added into the film, and There's a lot of message in there. But yeah, the people that I'm talking to openly have said, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm unhappy to the point of I can't see my life any further than this moment now. I'm just struck by them saying, but I've had nothing in the past. There's nothing there that's actually been a problem. My mum's been a really lovely mum. My dad's, they've stayed together, and they feel a lot of shame and a lot of guilt because they're going, but I shouldn't be broken now. There shouldn't be anything about my character to fix because there's been no breakings on the way. And I'm just going, right, already you're going to put yourself in a worse place because you're beating yourself up about beating yourself up. And it's a dangerous cycle. So for everybody to understand, and I think Dan says it a lot, that depression doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anybody at any point. And yes, it can be accumulation, magnitude of factors, but just understand it's happened. You're here now. You're in a point where you need to find change. It's the most integral, most vital thing you could do is working out now. And that's what people need to address. So I think for people like you to hear your stories, another speaker, I speak in schools, And she said, I never judge the person the amount of money in the home, but the amount of love inside of it. And I just think it's all these characters that I'm hearing where I think, thank God these voices are being said. Thank God this is being mentioned, because the amount of guilt and shame people do feel towards falling when they think they shouldn't have been, it really is. It's quite heartbreaking, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I'd go a step further as well. I mean, there's loads even just in that it doesn't even stop at depression. Because I know people who will go to me, well, I don't think I've ever really been depressed. But if I ask them about their life is quite grey. So not Pleasantville. It's like, there's no like, and this is something I used to feel even when I wasn't depressed. It was like if you have a range of emotions, a full range of emotions, I could feel the extremes. So if I was drunk, I could get exhilarated and I could get, so like, 100 out of 100 on the scale, or I could get down to 0, I could get down to fully depressed. But all this stuff in the middle, like day-to-day joy, day-to-day happiness, day-to-day sadness, day-to-day anger, just normal emotions, I'd just close down. So you don't even need to have gone as far as being depressed. It can be, my life's just a bit
plateau.
Who cares? Like, what's the point in this? And maybe you could describe that as depression, I suppose. But that's a huge part of it, and the guilt and the shame you mentioned is massive. That idea of, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to share my story, is that loads, exactly what you've just said, loads of the stuff I've read over the years are stories of people who had traumatic backgrounds and then turned their life around. And they're all incredible stories, and fair play to those people. And that will resonate massively with people who've had traumatic backgrounds. But I used to read them and think, but that isn't me. There's a bit in the start of the book actually where I talk about, I don't know whether you've ever heard of the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Events. It came out in like 1999, and it was the first like major study linking childhood trauma to problems later in life. And it's incredible that this isn't like talked about every day, because when you see the outcomes of the study, it's just mind blowing. Like, people who scored high with adverse childhood events it correlates with being in abusive relationships, being paid less money when you're older, having more chronic illnesses, all kinds of negative things later in life link back. And it's a test that was developed by people in that industry. 10 questions and you answer them. And when I first discovered this, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely me. Like, of everything I've learned, definitely me. And I did the questionnaire, and then at the end, it's just a yes/no questions. And at the end, it says add up all your yeses, and that's your ACE score. And the study showed that people who scored 4 or more out of 10 had these correlations with high things. And I scored 0. I was like, no serious adverse childhood events. And I was like, that just doesn't make any sense though, because theoretically this works. And that's when I started digging into it more. And I was like, I actually interviewed 2 professors from America last year and started talking to them more about this. And I want to speak to them again, because I think there's an industry-wide issue with this, the way we talk about it, that we talk about childhood trauma. Well, for most of us, we don't even like associating with that word. We don't like associating with abuse, neglect, trauma. If you did have a childhood where you can clearly see that happened, then it's like, yeah, okay, I can see it, as you say, I can link those things. And even then, they're just the headline things. So there's already in the language in this part of the world, people talk about capital T traumas and small t traumas. So again, think about it on a scale. If you've got a scale of trauma that can happen to you, of 0 being no trauma to 10 being the most trauma, I'd say capital T trauma is like 8, 9, and 10 on the scale. So things like people would recognize as trauma for a kid: being sexually abused, being raised by drug addicts, being raised by alcoholics, being hit repeatedly, watching your caregivers abuse each other. And then everything from 1 to 7 is small t trauma. The problem with that is if we've already got a block on the word trauma, neglect, and abuse, like I did, and like a lot of people I meet do, because they said I had a Pleasantville upbringing. Well, then we don't want to call it trauma at all. So we go, oh, I didn't have a traumatic experience. So then I started talking about, like, we need new language. So I started referring to them as programming experiences, because that's all it is. Think of yourself as a laptop. Another analogy, like the car production line. Laptops come out, They've got a couple of basic programs in them, which whatever your belief systems are, you might think that's different things. That's okay, doesn't matter. But after that, think of how many programs you need as a human to operate, just to live in a day-to-day life that you don't have when you're born. So just practical stuff. Like, you don't know how to, the example I give in the book is you don't know how to open a box of cereal. You have to learn that from someone. But most things, no one sits you down and goes, right, this is how you do that. So I've got this story about, I don't know whether I told this on Dan's podcast, I opened a box of cereal a couple of years ago, and I'd started doing this work, so I'd started exploring this stuff, and I don't eat that much cereal because I'd started getting in physical shape, good physics, so I was like, oh, it's crap. But every now and then, like everything, it's like, oh, fancy some. Went to the shops, and you've got your big box of cereal.
Yeah.
You open the two long flaps, if you can picture this, the two longest strips, and then there's two short little flaps inside. And I'm listening to music as I'm doing this. And so I open the two long flaps, I open the two short flaps, I rip off one of the short flaps, then I open the plastic bag inside the box on that side, and I poured the cereal. And then I stopped and started laughing because I'd started doing this work, and I was observing myself loads, which is a key part to changing your life. So you start to see who you really are. And I thought to myself, I've never seen any other human, bar one, open a box of cereal like that. Do you know, the ripping off the little flap on the side? I've never seen anyone do that. But guess who does it like that? My dad. I haven't seen my dad open a box of cereal for probably 30 years. And I don't open cereal much. And yet when I come to open a box of cereal, my brain, my control deck up here says, we've got a program for that, don't worry about it. So we open it just like my dad did. Now think about that. That's just a very, very tiny example. We learn everything about how to be a human from the people who program us when we come into the world. Everything. So we think we're born knowing how to love. That's not true. We learn how to love through the people we watch, which is why we end up, like people will say, oh, it's Freudian, like men end up marrying their mom and women end up marrying their dad. There's a lot of truth in that, because what you learn even on relationship level is, how should two people interact? Well, if you were raised by two people, you will copy how they interacted, and you will believe at a deep subconscious level, without knowing it, that that's how you interact with another human. That's a whole area in itself. But it comes down to the smallest things. So you might have, let's say whoever's listening or watching has experienced severe trauma, and you've dealt with that severe trauma. So you were abused, or you were hit, or you were raised by alcoholics, and you focused on that. Well, there's probably all kinds of tiny little things that also happened that you've completely ignored because you don't think they're relevant, when actually those are just as powerful. With the trauma scale, if you've got loads of 1 out of 10 traumas that happen to you, they add up to a 10 out of 10 trauma anyway. Have I ever given you the example? Have you ever heard my example of the ice cream?
No, mate, jump in.
It's one of my favorite.
This is why the book's so thick, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, you can't shut me up, I know. This is one of my favorite examples, and I was trying to explain this to my own dad a few weeks ago, because he's not into all this stuff, Joe. He's a 76-year-old man. It's like trying to explain.
Son.
Yeah, it's like, oh, Paul. He used to make sense when he was a lawyer. Now he's just talking nonsense. And they try their best, in fairness to them. But I was telling him about this thing, and I said, look, when we look at trauma, the problem is we look at trauma through the eyes of adults. So when we see something happen, we go, that's not a big deal. So, but think about like a toddler, a 3-year-old with an ice cream, even the way they hold it. Like a kid will hold an ice cream different to how an adult holds an ice cream. We hold an ice cream like it's just, it's a pound. It's not that precious. There's loads of them. Kids hold ice creams like it's the most precious thing. It's like the holy grail. Do you know what I mean? And the way they eat it, it's like, oh my God, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Watch a kid when they drop an ice cream and how they react. It's like the world has ended. And I was telling my dad this story, and he went to me, yeah, but you drop an ice cream when you were a kid, and we'd say to you, don't worry about it, we'll just get you another one. And I smiled and I went, and that's lovely. And it's part of the problem. Because think about it like this. Think about the equivalent. You come home from work one day and your house is gone. And you went, oh, yeah? And I went, would that traumatize you? Think about what your emotional attachment to your house. And he said, yeah. And I said, what if I just came up, put my hand on your back and said, don't worry about it, Dad, I'll buy you another one. Would that help? Would that make the trauma go away of all those emotions you had invested in that house? Would replacing that house with another house change how you feel? And he went, no. I went, exactly. It's the same for a kid with an ice cream. To a kid, that is the entire world. And actually what they need in that moment is for you to sit next to them and go, oh my God, how do you feel? And they're like, I feel awful. If you can help them articulate it, most kids at that age can't articulate it. But if they could articulate it, they'd be like, it's the end of my world. The world's just ended. Everything. I love that ice cream. And instead of saying, I'll get you another one, actually the best thing you can say is go, I know, yeah, it's awful. And you know what? It's okay to feel like that. It's okay to feel like it's the end of the world when your ice cream hits the floor. Because guess what happens? And this is where it's counterintuitive. And I practice this every day in my own life. When you do that, guess what happens? Kid processes their emotions in seconds, gets on with their day. The problem we've been taught as kids is to repress and suppress everything. And by doing that, we never process things properly, so they never leave us. One of my favorite things I learned when I was digging into the book was, like, scientifically, no one ever thinks about this. What is an emotion? An emotion is just a chemical reaction inside your body. And there's a chain of real scientific, like neuroscience, that says the chemical reaction lasts 90 seconds if you do nothing with it. So think about that. So the initial emotion of feeling depressed lasts 90 seconds. And yet we can manage to turn that into decades, some of us. We can be depressed for decades. Wow. And it was just an emotion that could have gone in 90 seconds.
This is getting my heart heavy, man. It's getting me. The avenue I'm going to go down, because we've spoke quite a lot about it, is childhood, and not even just your childhood, but, you know, I've got a daughter now. She's 11 months old. On this bus, me and Chrissy, my partner, we put on for our community loads of little community projects. So we'll have like arts and crafts and creative. We had a DJ last night, and awesome. Really awesome bits and bobs. We call that Off the Breaks, and that's for 11 to 14-year-olds. We're looking at doing another one called Accelerate, which is for 17 to 26-year-olds. And again, can really hone in on some amazing creative skills and the more key and core value skills of confidence and networking, being around other people, things that the world needs more of now, rather than the very academic and academia, which I go to schools, I teach, and I've seen it's really drilled into. So with that, you know, something you said in part of this podcast, I feel it's quite nuanced. You know, you want kids to be exactly who they are, and what you're saying then, don't just say, oh, don't cry over spilt milk. Let them feel that emotion. Let them feel how they feel. Help them through that process. Let them process their own emotions. Absolutely love that part. There was the bit about allowing them to be shy, which is great. So we do a lot of like performances after everything they've learned. We've had a rapper here, a beatboxer, and so on. And then you know exactly which kids are going to be performing on the stage, and you know which ones won't. And that's great. But to some degree, you do want to encourage and help them do things that are going to be uncomfortable and tricky, and put them outside of the comfort zone of just who they are. So with that nuanced perspective and taking them a little bit away from who they are deep inside, which could be just a shy on their own person, what's your perspective on that? And how do you, I just really do want to hone in on young people, young minds, and looking at that root as much as we can.
Yeah, I get it. And I agree. It's a great avenue to go down. And it's always worth me saying to begin with, because I'm conscious of this, I don't have my own kids. So I've got a niece and nephew I'm really close to, who are the closest thing I've got to that. And they come into my thinking a lot as I've been doing this work over the past few years. But I always make a point of saying I haven't got kids, because I've seen over the years the dangers of like trying to give other people any sort of advice or anything when you haven't got kids and they have. It's like, you wait until you've actually got kids and then you'll see.
You've been a kid though, mate. I think anyone can give advice if they've been a kid.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I also like this stuff, whilst it might be theoretical to me, I believe in it so much, and I've seen it work in real life. And I'm like, and again, I've put this into play with my niece and nephew, and my relationships with them have improved. And I've seen the way they react to things has changed because of some of this stuff. So I'm with you completely on there's a balance. This is something I say to people a lot is, and I think this is the difference between loads of the work I do and loads of the work I see in traditional personal development and self-help. I don't run around saying these are the right answers. There is a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Loads of the stuff I see online these days and have done for years, that's exactly what people say. Do exactly what I'm telling you to do and the world will be fine. And the problem with that is you'll often do that and it's like, well, it's not fine. Well, what do I do now? And my big thing is, look, one of the biggest parts of the work I do is take responsibility. So everybody's life, we've got all this stuff in common and we are all unique. So whatever you're dealing with in your own life, whatever your kids are or the kids you deal with, treat them as individuals. How is it best for them to operate with this stuff? We're always encouraged to think of things in black and white terms. And a big part of the stuff I do is get away from that thinking. Start to think about things on a scale. So even when we talk about shy kids versus not shy kids, well, you'll get one shy kid who doesn't want to speak to anybody. And if a scale of 0 is the shyest you can possibly be and 100 is the most extroverted you could be, they may be a 5 on the scale. You might get another shy kid who's 25 on the scale. Now, you can't treat those two kids the same just because they're both shy. Because what we're trying to do over time is encourage people to expand and grow. Because again, even as grown-ups, growth is a really important part of us feeling fulfilled. If we never grow, we don't feel fulfilled. So it's the same for kids, but it's treating them slightly differently. So if you've got a kid, this is how I'd approach it generally. If you've got a kid who's chronically shy, the first thing to do is to let them know that being shy is absolutely fine and you love them no matter what. Because what we don't want to do is, and this is what happens subconsciously to all of us growing up, we attach the idea of being loved with the idea of doing something that we were told to do. So it's, if you are good, be good, and you get more love. That's the subconscious message we get. I like you when you're good, I don't like you when you're bad. But we all know deep down there are times when we're bad. So then we start thinking that part of us isn't worthy of love. It's not good enough. So what we want to do is make sure that no matter what we're saying to kids, they know that they're loved. So with my niece and nephew even, I will regularly just say to them, or I'll drop them a message saying, I love you no matter what. You can do whatever you want in life. Anything. And I mean anything. If you want to be bums and sit around playing computer games all day, you do that, you will still have my love. Regardless, it doesn't matter. You don't have to achieve anything to have my love. You've just got it. You can be a pain in the arse. We can have an argument. You will still have my love. Full stop. And at the same time, going back to the shy example, because I think it's a good one, we can gently encourage. Well, how do you feel? Talk to people. How do you feel? Would you like to be more involved? When you look at those kids on the stage, because I know what it felt like to be shy, I would look at the kids on the stage and think, I wish I could do that. I wish I could be one of those kids on the stage. And ultimately, why don't I want to get on the stage? Because I don't feel good enough. And I look at them and I think they must feel good enough. And this is all happening subconsciously. So I won't get up. Well, what is good for me over time is to slowly, step by step, work towards getting on that stage. Why do we all, fast forward into when we're grown-ups, it's one of the big things. I'm just going to turn off my email so they don't keep beeping. One of the big things is, like, think about the language we use. As grown-ups, we'll say things like, or often we'll say things like, oh, I need to let my hair down. And what we mean is, we want to be ourselves. We want to go out and have fun and dance and sing and shout and move around. And I always go to people now, who taught us to put our hair up? Imagine if a 4-year-old came into you and said, Mum, Dad, Uncle, Auntie, whatever, I've just had a thought, right? I want to go out in the back garden or go to the park and I'm going to pretend to be Superman and I'm going to run around with a cape on and I'm going to scream and I'm going to dance and I'm going to play and I'm going to play with the dog and I'm going to play with the other kids. And you'd go, yeah, okay, that's perfectly normal. Imagine if they said to you then, so I just need a couple of shots of whiskey before I go. You'd go, what? They go, well, I can't go and do all that unless I'm drunk, can I? Come on. That's basically what we do as grown-ups. And it's because we want to be able to be the kid on the stage. We want to be able to be the person doing karaoke. We want to be able to perform and be ourselves. But because we've shut it down over the years, or even shut it down from when we started, we don't do it. So loads of this work is actually in a practical, something I love about it is we combine the psychological and emotional theoretical stuff with real life practical stuff. And people will often say to me, it's why they prefer this stuff to like therapy, because therapy will get them to a point where they're like, yeah, get it all. What do I do in my life? What do I do literally in my life now? And therapists are like, it's not my job.
Yeah.
Just feel the emotion. Again, I felt the emotion. What do I do next? And this work is like, well, what you should do next is try getting close to the stage. Just go and sit on the edge of the stage first. Practically go and sit on the edge of the stage and see how you feel. Get used to being there while all the people are looking at you. And then what you do next, will get up and stand at the back.
Wow.
And see what that feels like. And then maybe sing a little bit. And then see how...
Yeah. Mate, do you know, your Mr. Analogy, I've had an analogy through this. I was equating it to swimming. And you've got a kid in a pool, you never just take him to the deep end and launch him in and just go, see you later, good luck.
Good luck, yeah.
It's holding on and then kicking the legs. And then suddenly they're in the shallow end, but they're using their arms a little bit with armbands. And then you take the armbands off suddenly. And some kids just go and that's it. Some need a little bit more nurturing still and a better explanation even. Oh, it's not just about flailing, it's about using your arms in such a way. And then suddenly they catch up with the kids. And by the end of it, hopefully, you've got them all to that independent deep end. And I was listening to it all the way, just thinking that's the way to do it. It's just building up slowly, knowing everybody's an individual and just treating them in that way. What do they need in this situation? Everything's context and situational. So, it might not be, come on, get on stage. Because I'll be honest, for me, I got kicked out of my schools. I got kicked out of primary school, bro. That takes some doing. And they let me have another go at secondary school. And, you may even see it in this podcast. I love people so much. I love conversations. I love talking. But I do stutter a little bit and I get a little bit nervous because I feel I'm going to say the wrong thing at times. And I'm then getting my head about it. And I really do think that built from being at school. I'm dyslexic, quite severely dyslexic, and it was never taken seriously in my school. They just kept saying, he's not trying. He's just not bothered. He's not trying. And my mum's quite a big business lady, so she didn't want to get involved. She's just like, go and do your thing. I'll do my thing. So I was just left on my own as a bit of a kid. And I remember the one thing a teacher did, and he was a very militant Marine teacher, and he would literally get me, knowing I despise reading because I can't, got me in front of the whole class to go and read in front of everybody. And I'm just panicking, I'm sweating. And then I remember it really well. People started laughing because I couldn't do it. And then I started crying and people laughed more. And I stormed out and I smashed some windows up. And as an experience as a kid, and I just started smashing stuff up. And then they tell me I'm the person in the wrong because of all that. And I need to be excluded for a little while. Came back and it was just that constant. But if it was, Mikey, I'm thinking of getting you to read out. I'm going to give you a bit of prep time though. Go and read this book, have a think about it. Tell me a page you really enjoyed, read something you really enjoy, and built me up in that way because it's meaningful to me and because it's passionate in me. And I'm like, oh, this is about rugby or this is about boxing or whatever it was at the time. I would have gone all day and got in front of the class and built me up that way. But definitely from what you're saying, it filled me with a lot of belief and a lot of excitement for being that teacher in this class on the bus, not classroom, but being that teacher and getting to really discover all them individuals. And I think that's where the education system collapses and falls, not all the time, because there's brilliant teachers in the education system, but some of the time where they just try and treat everybody as the same and they just get them in and use the syllabus, treat them in the same way. And you're going to get my kids there that are very creative, outspoken, playful, and then you'll get them Pauls in the class that may have the more academic, shy, introverted route, and they need completely different ways of being. So I love what you said then, man. It was so profound and powerful. And honestly, we had a session last night. We've got 2 weeks off, but we've just had the funding extended for like till next May. So I'm so excited, and I'd love to get you down for a session. Maybe that'd be brilliant.
I'd love to, mate. I love stuff like that, and I love people like you who do what you're doing. And thank you for what you just said. But what you've just said is really powerful. That entire story, you could take that entire story and turn that into hours of exploring the different parts of it. And this is where it all ties in. And it helps finding, my work is all about finding peace and contentment in the world. And actually what that starts inside, and where it leads to is we look at other people and we stop judging them and blaming them. So, because straight away you tell that story, most people would say, well, that teacher's awful. That teacher's bad. And I stop and go, but the teacher's doing that with the best of intentions. And the teacher, going back to the car analogy from earlier, the teacher's just doing what that teacher was taught. This is how you get kids outside their comfort zone. And they'll have seen some kids respond well to that over time. So then it's just like, well, if you don't respond well to it, it's your fault. It's because, and this is where we get loads of different parts come in. We get labels. It's because you're dyslexic. It's because you've got ADHD. It's because you've got OCD. And the number of times people will say, even you then, as you were describing yourself to me, I've had a guy I've been working with for a while now. And when in our first call, he said to me, well, I've got ADHD, Paul, so I can't do certain things. And I said to him just gently, describe to me what having ADHD is like. And he said, well, for example, behind me and where I was on the call, there was a light switch. And he went, so for example, like as you're talking, because that light switch is there, sometimes my brain will just go onto the light switch and I'll switch off from what you're saying. And I went to him, yeah, me too. And he went, what? I went, me too. I went, that's just being a human. Like, we all sometimes stutter. We all sometimes forget what we were going to say. We all sometimes. The problem is the stories we tell ourselves. We get then locked in things. So it's like, you are this, and that is bad or good. And therefore, if you've got this label, you can do this and you can't do this. And I'm like, it's nonsense. Half of the time, the things we're told are disabilities are superpowers. They're just labeled wrong. It's incredible. And even going back earlier to depression, I'm a huge believer, and this is a whole different topic about health and stuff, but we look at health and depression as bad things. I look at it completely different now. I look at poor health or depression as good things. It's your body saying to you, something needs to change. Like, you need a rest. Depression ultimately is, you need a rest.
Yeah, depressed. Like pressure, depressed.
You've been, and the other thing about depression is depression. You push it. You're pushing all your emotions down. Come on. We're doing something. It's your system saying to you, we're not doing something here that we should be doing, or we're doing something we shouldn't be doing. We need to look at it again. Health problems are the same. The problem is we've created this society now, and I won't go down this rabbit hole because I'll be there for hours. We've built a society basically around money and power.
Yeah.
So everything comes back to that. Even the past 18 months, everything comes back to money and power. So it's like, does this make money? And you're like, sorry, should that be the first question we're asking? It's like, well, if it doesn't make money, we're not going to do it. Like, well, no, it doesn't make, like, loads of the stuff I do and work with people, it solves health problems, it solves depression, it solves suicide. Guess what? All the people who sell pills for those things, they're not interested in that. Why? Because you can't sell pills. I say to people, look, you can solve all of your life, like my whole book, you can solve all your problems in life just by thinking differently, feeling differently, and eating nicer food, more healthy food. Guess what? That doesn't make very many people much money. Yeah. You've got huge multi-billion-dollar industries crumble under that. Because what do people who want to make money do? They go, take this pill. There's something wrong with you. Take this pill. You'll feel better. You're like, does it fix the problem though? No, it doesn't fix the problem. We don't even know what the cause of the problem is. Just take the drug. And when you start doing this work, all of a sudden it's like, actually, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just like all the other humans. We all have flaws. We all have problems. Some of us have different problems to others. Some of our brains work slightly differently to others. But guess what? Nothing wrong with that at all. There's nothing wrong with us.
Dude, you're speaking my lingo here. I mean, the same. I love doing this podcast, and I think I'm maybe about 90 episodes deep, and we've picked up a bit of a following now, and really excited about it. But I literally just adore it. I love doing it. I love meeting people and hearing stories. And you can imagine how time consuming it can be being on the podcast. Then I'm filming it all. I have to go edit it, do work on it and stuff. But the first question I'll get asked when I go in, is it actually making you any money though? Are you actually, is anything from this? Literally the other day, I got a beautiful message from somebody just out the blue, random, and it ended up in the inbox that you can't read unless you've accepted it. So it's somebody that didn't know me at all, but just sent this, and I'm sure you get it all the time, a beautiful message of, you don't understand how much I needed those words on this day. You've helped me more than you could ever imagine. Fills me up. Like hearing it and saying it now, it genuinely gives me a goosebump moment. And that is priceless to me. That just feels so important to add into society. But it is the how we've been structured. We could talk about the structure of the world as much as we want, the pharmaceutical industry. We could go on them rabbit holes, and I'm always willing to, because I do believe the world that we've set up is not there for us to be happy in. It's there for people to make as much money as they can in. And the byproduct is we become unhappy existence from that. I think that's true. So I don't blame the people that would say that to me when I go in the kitchen and they say, are you making any money? Are you making any money? I understand they're a product of it, but I think people listening to this, it could be a parent who's worried about their son or daughter making the money or whatever. Just what might be good is to just meta program and rethink about how you're going to ask that sort of question about if it's a podcast they're doing, if it's a passion thing they're doing, not where's the money going to be, but it's just, oh, how are you going to, what's the next steps for you? How can you take this? Where are you going to go with it? And just excite them to that fact. And the money comes, the money always comes. I mean, I met Dan's paying me to be a part of this. Then I'm doing another person's podcast now. And it did come eventually. Because, I mean, imagine when I went in and told my mum, I mean, after a few substance abuse days, this is a long story there. But I just turned into, I'm going to be a poet. She literally laughed in my face. She goes, yeah, but who's a poet? What do you mean you're going to be a poet? You're not going to pay for poetry. You know, you can imagine this, going and talking in a school, your first invoice, and I'm open to say it, it's like 450 quid, 500 a day you can get for going and talking in a school. And the second my mum accidentally opened one of my invoices, she went, you what? It was just an unbelievable moment. But it is, if you start with passion as the forefront, if you start with purpose as the forefront, you unbelievably, excitably love this thing, the money will come as well. So if you're a worried parent about them lazing out, being on their Xbox or whatever it is, can you reprogram the way you think and how you put questioning across? Don't bring money to the forefront, because you're starting on a very low energy point. You're basically having a go. If you can change it, I think that can really help people. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with what you just said as well about all different parts of it. And it still amazes me to this day, and something I talk about a lot, especially in the modern age. Part of the problem we've got, your parents, my parents, the same. They're, again, go back to the same thing. Where does their program come from? Well, my dad, his generation was brought up that what you spend most of your time doing is what should bring you in money that you survive on. Well, that's not the world we live in now. So you can create a life now where you make money doing something that pays for your survival. And this is literally how I redesigned my entire life 3 years ago. I sat down, I went, what do I want my life to look like? And I created a life where I had ways to make money that I enjoyed, but they weren't my dream. But it was a good way to make some money. and that paid for my survival. And what it created on the side was loads of space and time, because then I could do things and it didn't matter whether they made money or not. So I could do podcasts, and I could play the guitar, and I could write a book. And it's really, I have the exact same thing, the exact same experience. People always say to me, how's the book doing? And what they mean is, how many copies have you sold and how much money have you made? My dad asked me it yesterday. And as I told, my answer is usually the same. I don't know. I'm not obsessively checking the sales, because that's not the point. I didn't write it to make as much money as I possibly could in 3 months. I wrote it to help as many people as I possibly can over the next 20 years. That book, hopefully that book will outlive me, and people will still be reading it after I've died, and it will still be helping people then. That's what that book is for. It's not to make me rich. That's not, if it was to make me rich, it's a silly idea. I often say that to people. If the plan is, if your sole aim is to make loads of money, you're going down the wrong route. Like even me becoming a lawyer, it was stupid. It's a stupid thing to do. To become a lawyer, to be super rich is stupid, because you're working for other people. There's a limit on what they'll pay you. It's why I set up my own company when I was 29, because I was looking at my bosses and they were saying to me, well, you keep working your bollocks off for the next 20 years and you can be me. And I said to one of my bosses the day I was leaving, if you come and work for me, I'll give you half the money you bill to clients. You'll give yourself a 10-fold pay rise, because you're giving most of the money you make to this company. And I remember looking at me and going, fair point.
I tell you, I mean, same here. I've got a book. It's Life's Beautiful Game. It's my poetry collection.
Love it.
And I remember the day I sent it to my friend to look over it, who sort of, he's got a big ego. He's quite narcissistic. We don't speak so much anymore. There's a long story there, but he wanted to sort of edit it and go behind it. And I remember the email I got back was just, this is a pile of shit. Literally, that was basically what he said. You're going to have to, I had 50 poems. And especially when poetry comes from the heart, it means something to you, it's your expression. Can you really be wrong with what you're writing? I don't think there's wrong.
No.
So for me, you know, as a dyslexic, but somebody that really just wanted to write for them, there's again a long story of why I got into poetry. It came out of the most unlikely of places, through the loss of a friend. But then I found a superpower. I realized, no, writing, all my life I've been told it's not for me. Actually, I've got a story. I've got things to say. I'm just going to put it on paper. And yeah, lo and behold, people did enjoy it. But all them poems had a different meaning to me, had a different feeling to me. So after he cut it down to only 4 poems out of 50 can stand, for a minute, my ego was hit hard, and I thought, oh, I got really down about it. But suddenly I went, no, this not at all. This is right for me. I've got 50 different artists to all illustrate the different poems in their way, and it's just it's a hurdle. I'm a completionist. I just want to do a poetry book, poetry collection, have something I'm really proud of out. And then when people see me give a talk or present it, whatever it is, if they really liked it, they can take a little bit of memorabilia, just something away to go, there's that guy. That's enough for me. So when I sort of given the FU and said, you know what, I'm just going to do this. I'm self-publish it. I'll bring it out in my own way, put my own money in. And yeah, it got really well received, and people from all back in the day that I'd not remembered all went and got a copy, and it was a decent number, but I really didn't care. And my mum, again, she always asking, have you got a resale yet? Have you printing more copies? Are you still selling them? How's it going? And in my heart, I just don't care, because I've did what I wanted to do. I've got my souvenir. I'm really proud of that book. And that's something I was always told you'll never be able to do. You know, writing, stick away from this, stay clear. Well, I've gone and done it. I'm cool. I've made something out of it. I move on to filmmaking next, or whatever it is. I just love moving and doing. And the money is never at the forefront of my imagination. It's just proving to people as well that, yeah, I've done that thing that you said I couldn't. I'm going to go next now. So I think this conversation is absolutely brilliant. And you just giving me loads of moments where I'm like, oh, that's the reason I did that thing. That's
Yeah,
why
I
I'm
love
in that
it,
way.
mate. What's the book called again?
Life's Beautiful Game.
Life's Beautiful Game.
Life.
Okay.
I'll send you a copy, mate. It's already done. I'll
Well, I
send
was
you a
going to
copy
say
of it.
I'll send you a copy of mine. I'd love to see yours. And
Switcheroo.
yeah, absolutely. And the everything you've said then, yeah, resonates massively in it. And this is huge. And I want to just go back to something you said earlier, but it ties into what you've just been saying. When you talk about the emails you get for the work you do, I got an email last night at like 11 o'clock that I need to reply to today, and it brought tears to my eyes. And I literally sat there and reflected on it, and I thought, this is exactly why I do what I do. And I could make no money from this. And when someone says to me, but what have you made from it? I go, how much do you think that's worth? Like, put a price on that. And the problem we have in the world we've built is there's a reason people become multi-billionaires. It's because they're chasing that feeling. They want to feel like that. And they think the more money you have, and I'm speaking from experience here, this is the world I was brought up in, this is who I was. The more money I have, the more money I make, the more things I buy, sooner or later it will feel like that. And that's just not how it works, which is why you have multi-billionaires and famous people killing themselves and who are miserable and have to keep doing things and keep making money and do things that are unethical or immoral. And if I guarantee if I could sit down with them face to face and look them in the eye and say to them, how do you feel deep inside? They'd say, hollow. One day I'll feel better. One day I'll make enough money that it feels good. And I'll say to them, it won't. It'll never will, because what you're doing, that feeling you get from writing your own poetry and going, I am proud of myself for what I've done. That is priceless. There is not a figure you could put on that you can't get that feeling by making a sum of money. It's not possible. You can't get that feeling that you get when someone emails you saying, thank you for what you've done. You've changed my life. Thank you for what you've done. You'll never know how much it helped me when I was in a dark moment. There isn't a number you can put on that. And I always say the same thing to everyone anyway now. It's all make-believe. Money doesn't exist. It's like, it was something, when people say to me, money's the root of all evil, I'm like, it can't be. Did money exist before the devil existed? Like, whatever your religious beliefs are, like go back to the beginning of time and you've got the devil going, I am the start of evil. And someone goes, no, you're not. I've got a £10 note. This is the root of all evil. And someone's like, that hasn't even been invented yet. The devil would be furious. The devil would be like, there's a picture of the Queen from 2021 on that note. That can't be the root of all evil. It can't be. I must have existed as the devil before money did. I must be the start. No, it's money. You're like, it's bullshit. We made it up. It's a system that we invented as humans.
What would you say would it be fear for you as a root of evil?
Well, that's a really good question. So the root of everything I believe, so I wouldn't say evil, but I would say the root of all problems in life. I don't really believe in good and evil anymore. I believe we all have good and bad inside us. And when you can, loads of the work I do is quite dark because it's all about looking at the darkest part of yourself. It's the opposite of loads of the self-help world of looking in the mirror and telling yourself how great you are. There's a part of that, don't get me wrong, being kind to yourself, but it's looking at the darkest part of yourself and understanding that we are all capable of that darkness, of that evil. And then actually that allows us to be more compassionate to us and to everybody else. The root for me, and that's what the book is all about, is self-worth. And do I feel good enough? Because actually, when you solve that, when you feel good enough and when you feel like you're worthy inside you, the badness and any evil thoughts, they go away. All I have when I'm at my best, and again, this is not constant, I have to work on it, but at my best, all I have for the outside world is compassion. So I can be around, it doesn't matter who you're talking about. You could be talking about a mass murderer, and my first thought is, well, I wonder what happened to them to turn them into that. Because if you went back to when they were 2 years old, I've got stories, even within my own family, that make me cry thinking about them, because I think about little children. And this is something I heard. There's a British Swiss philosopher called Alain de Botton. Do you know him? The School of Life.
Really I know the School of Life. Yeah.
So the guy behind that, Alain de Botton, And I heard him say once, which I loved. He said, humans are basically just all kids in grown up. Adults are all kids in grown up bodies. And if you start looking at grown ups as children who have got all this damage they're carrying with them from childhood, actually the world makes a lot more sense. Because when you can go back to look, think of any kid you've ever met, like at 2 years old. Which of them do you look at and go, that's going to be an evil mass murderer? This one's going to commit genocide. Like, you just wouldn't, it just doesn't happen. Kids are beautiful, pure souls. And what happens to them over time creates the things we see in our world, and then the world in which they're born into exacerbates this stuff. So the more of this stuff you do, the more you just find a place where it's like,
that is on a Rogan. He said he changed the way he started seeing people after he started seeing them as babies. And again, I've started doing that in my day-to-days. And when I might feel a bit ticked off at somebody or whatever it is, I just start tracing back and going, well, why are they such an angry being, or why are they so closed off or being in a certain way to me? And it really calms that aspect of you, doesn't it? It just makes you think, oh, I'm going to be nice to this person now because they've probably not had it so easy.
Absolutely. I want to share one thing with you about, because we've been talking about billionaires, and this, because I'd been doing this work for so long. When I watched this, I had to stop watching the show. There's a show on Netflix called Inside Bill's Brain or something like that. It's about Bill Gates. It's a series about Bill Gates. So for all the people who believe Bill Gates is the supervillain right now and all that, doesn't matter what you believe about him, but ultimately he's a multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
And it showed all the stuff he's done. And how old's Bill Gates now? In his 70s, maybe?
He looks all right, but yeah, let's go 70s.
There's loads of stuff about his family in it and his relationship with his mum in it. And all this stuff, I always go back to that now. So I'm always thinking about what were people's childhoods like, what were the relationship with their parents like. And there was loads of this stuff in it, loads of dysfunction, loads of problems. Nice childhood, but similar to mine. You can see how it would create someone who needs to be a billionaire. But the most poignant part of the episodes I watched was, there was a bit, and it's just him talking to someone sitting behind the camera, interviewing him. And they said to him, what do you think, if your mum was still alive now, with everything, think of everything he's achieved, one of the most powerful men on the whole planet, he's worth multiple billions, maybe over 100 billion, I don't even know at this point. He's created companies that, change the world, the way we use electronics and computers and things. Now, depending on what you think of him, but now he's massively involved in world health and stuff like that. And they said to him, so what do you think your mum would say to you if she was still alive now? And he paused and he said something like, I think she'd tell me my table manners are still not good enough. And when he said it, I sat back in my chair like someone had punched me. I was like, there is the giveaway line of a man who never feels good enough. Why? Because he was trained that he was never good enough by his mum. No matter what. Think about, you can't achieve more on this planet pretty much than what he's achieved. And when he's asked what his own mum would think of him, his first thought is not, she'd be proud of me. She'd tell me, well done, Bill. She'd give me a big hug. She'd say, oh my God, how many lives have you saved? Or how many people have you made rich? She'd criticize me for the way I eat my food. And I was just like, there you go. Put that clip on everything.
Dude.
That explains our entire work.
I was laughing because thinking how we started this podcast and just saying how chunky your book is. And now, I mean, we've been on a great tangent and a long podcast, but now I'm just thinking the book could have been this big actually, because it's just a mirror and just say you're good enough and then everyone would be all right after that.
well, this is the beautiful thing about this work, because there's loads of the self-help world, which is that look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you're good enough. And my big thing is this is why, like, I'm evangelical about the stuff I've done, and I think it's brilliant. And at the same time, I think whatever you can do to change your life, you do it. If it resonates with you, do it. So if it works for you to look in the mirror and tell yourself you're good enough and you're beautiful and all the rest of it, do it. My problem with that is, with all the work I do, those dark parts of us like to talk. So when we stand in the mirror saying, you're good enough, you're good enough, you're good enough, for lots of people, including me, what actually happens is we're talking to the bits of us we already like, and the bits of us we don't like, which is a whole another part of this work, are whispering to us, and they're going, "You're not good enough. You're a piece of shit. Think about what you did. Think about what you thought about that person last week. You're cruel. You're horrible. Think about that thing you did. Think about all the mistakes you've made in your life." So the work I do goes, right, let's go and deal with all that first. And then we learn how to know that that is good enough as well. We can love that side of us as well, and we understand where it comes from, and then we come back. And it's all about going into the darkness to come back to the light.
I'll give you an anecdote and a moment in my life where that your light side and dark side I started to really understand, and it was from a quote. But I lived in South Africa for a while, and I was working in a primate sanctuary in Pretoria. But one day I decided to go out for the day, and I went to a really small town, so just outside of Pretoria, and it had like an art exhibition up. There's quite a lot of people around. And can you remember when we were in lockdown, the statues were being taken down and so on? Well, because of this anecdote and because of this moment in my life, I had a very different view to what a lot of my friends and people around me in social media had, because they were just like, get all these racists down or get a whatever down. But in this art exhibition, and it was actually in the town, so it was scattered all over the place, they had statues put up for this day. And there was Nelson Mandela, who else was there? Martin Luther King, amazing people. But then as I started walking around, I saw Adolf Hitler on one, and I saw Stalin, and I started seeing all these dictators around. But as I'm walking more and more, I noticed that they're in a certain formation. So I get quite interested, and they're all strategically placed facing one another, and they're having face downs all over this township. You've got Martin Luther King staring down Hitler. You've got Mandela looking down Stalin, and they're all staring one another in a certain way. So I go up to each statue, and literally on the plaque, it says the same thing. And it said, the line between good and evil runs through every human heart.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that moment. It was where I went, oh my God, these were babies. These were just genuinely babies at one stage. And like, you had the most extreme evil and the most extreme goodness all facing one another down. And yeah, that was my perspective. That was a real learning moment for me in my existence. And for people to be in London town or wherever you're based, to see all of the truths of history together, but adding to it and seeing them face one another down, could that be more beneficial and more powerful and profound for people? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's really powerful. I love that. Really powerful.
Genuinely changed a part of me there. It was the best place to go to. So that's my South Africa days in a nutshell. Now, Paul, I want you here forever because I genuinely love everything you're about. I love everything we've done today and spoke about. I have got to get to Dan's later because he's got a podcast today. I'm looking forward to that one. Can we just give me a bit of the practical stuff in your book, and for the audience? I've still got probably a 20 minutes or so you can give us some. Go home, man. Give it some. We're on the last run, but just talk about some of the things you do daily with people, practical advice, really helpful tips. It could be for parenting, it could be for people a bit older and just feeling lost. I know that's very arbitrary, but I'd love to hear some ideas that you've got for people, if that helps.
Yeah, sure. So, the book is packed full of practical exercises. That's the whole point of it. The point of the book is so that people can effectively go through the entire coaching experience with me without paying for me to coach them. So, for 12 quid or 15 quid, whatever it is, it takes you through the entire thing. So the philosophy and exercises to do. So there's loads that take you on a journey through it. The biggest one, which you've already heard me mention on Dan's podcast, but I'll mention it again for your audience, is it's the multiple personality one. And so one of my most high profile players, an ex Liverpool and England footballer, and he kindly shared his story, and that's on my podcast. And I asked him, and I ask people a lot when we get to the end of the process of doing this work, what is the most powerful thing that they did, the work they did. And one of the things they often reference is this stuff. And it's multiple personality work, basically. And it's an exercise that ties into everything we've been talking about already. So in very basic terms, all the stuff we've talked about what happens to you when you're a kid, what that leads to, the way I like to say to describe it to people is, stop thinking of yourself as one person, and instead think of yourself as like a ship. And inside your brain is a control deck with loads of people running the ship. So like, it depends what movies you like, but like, this Starship Enterprise or one of the big ships on Star Wars, you can picture those control decks with everybody running them. That's what we've all got inside our head. You start out as just you, the real version of you, the truest form, little Paul, little Mikey, and that's the truest version of you. But then you come into the world and you hit a situation, and your control deck says to the real version of you, can you deal with this situation? And you say, so to me, like, we'd be in an extroverted situation, that we need an extrovert. And the introverted little me would go, no chance, I can't do this. So the team in the control deck say, don't worry about it. We've got a lab, we'll sort it out. And they go into the lab and they start building new personalities. And what we do throughout our life is we create a whole cast of these personalities. So the way to start looking at yourself from now on is not as one person, but as multiple people. And when I start talking to people about this, it often blows their mind, because it's like, shit. And what I always say is, think of the people who if you start thinking of yourself as different people, what springs to mind straight away? Who are the different personalities? So to give an example, when I first started hearing about this work 3 years ago now, over 3 years ago, I was in Bali. There was a girl giving a presentation and she was talking about different parts of this. I've adapted it over the years and built on it. But she said one of her personalities likes to moan a lot. And she calls that personality Sandra, because she used to work with a woman called Sandra who moaned a lot. So whenever her moaning personality comes out, she goes, oh, here's Sandra. And she said, think about your own personalities and give them names. And I remember sitting there laughing to myself, because I thought, I don't need to give my personalities names, because they are so prominent. They already have names. So when we've been talking throughout this podcast of the old me and the new me, and the little shy me versus what I became, if you spoke to all of my friends from my life up until I was 38, they all know me as Copy, not Paul, Copy. So my surname with a Y on the end, which is basically what in Liverpool, that's what 99% of nicknames are. It's your name with a Y on the end. Smithy, Copy, Jonesy. So I was Copy, but Copy is, I realized doing this work, he's a character that I developed. He is the extroverted, outgoing, loud. He goes into a pub, he drinks drinks, he gives everyone a hug, he cracks jokes, he does karaoke, he dances. Very loud, very extroverted, very outgoing. And he was a character I created. There's another one, just my surname, Cope. Some people just refer to me as Cope. Cope is the lawyer. He's the guy who wears a suit. He's the guy who, when I needed to be, think about this, the shy little boy. Are you going to go into a meeting room and control a meeting room of high-powered business people? No chance. So we developed this other character, strong, assertive, wears a suit, literally like superhero movies. They literally dress differently sometimes. Sometimes they speak differently. They've got different accents, slightly different accents. When your character who's with your mates from home, your normal accent comes out a bit more. When you're in a work environment, maybe you're a little bit posher. Maybe you speak more slowly. When I travel, I speak more slowly. He was another character, Cope, the manipulator, the controller, the powerful businessman. And what I always say to people is, start thinking of your own. The first ones you can think of are your rock star personalities. That's what I like to call them. These are the ones that are most prominent. And a big exercise that goes through the book, and I get everybody to do that I work with, is over time we build out our full cast list. Because what we're doing to begin with is figuring out who we really are. The first part of this work is to understand who we really are. So we go through and we figure out, we find all these different characters, and usually you can subdivide them, because someone will say to me, oh, I've got a dad character. I'm different with my kids than I am with my work colleagues. And I go, great, let's talk about him. What's his character traits? What brings him out? We'll go on to that in a second. But also what you can then usually do is there more than one dad character though? Because usually you'll have a disciplinarian dad character, and you'll have a fun dad character, and you'll have a lazy dad character. So then you can start getting through all these. And then what we do is we go through, because the way to picture this is your whole cast is on a stage in your life, but the kicker is there's only one microphone. So only one character is ever on the mic at any one time. And until we've done this work, until we know about it, each character has been built to meet different needs in your life. And the way it works right now is subconsciously, the team in your control deck, they decide who gets the mic. So whatever situation you're in, over time, the mic gets passed to a different character. So what we do in the exercise, so going back to the practical stuff, we do a list of all the characters, and we can sit down and do this properly. So we can go, right, think about it. I've got this outgoing character, I've got this work character, I've got this. And then we leave it and we just let it float around our minds as we go through our life. Because then we start just gently observing and asking ourselves in any situation, who's this? What character is this? And I was finding characters for 2 years after I started doing this, because you'll all of a sudden realize there's characters in there you don't want to admit. Like one I found after 2 years was a self-pity character. There's a part of me that loves to feel sorry for myself, but guess what? I bury him because I don't like him. I don't want to admit that. That's not a nice part of me to admit to at the beginning of this work. So then we do a table on a spreadsheet, all their names. What are their character traits? Are they shy? Are they extroverted? Are they noisy? Are they bold? Are they manipulative? Are they sad? Are they angry? Are they self-pitying? Are they jealous? Are they judgmental? And then we do another one. What makes them take the mic? In what situations are they taking the mic? And then there's too much to go into now for like all of the different parts of it. But to jump to the end of it, the conclusion of this work is, do I like or dislike each character? And the kicker is, going back to what we were saying before about loving yourself, it's not the ones we like that are important. It's the ones we dislike. The ones we dislike are fundamentally the parts of us that we don't feel are good enough. So what we then do, and this is where it's the opposite of the stand in the mirror and tell yourself you're lovely, you go into the darkest parts of yourself and you understand at a base level why you created them, what needs they were meeting for you, what they achieved for you in your life. And remember that we created them as children, usually, when we didn't know what else to do. So then at the end of it, we come to a very basic position, which is now you're a grown up. You're not a child anymore. So you can choose, you can become aware of it and then choose who gets the microphone in any given situation. And over time, what we want to do is, I always think of it like a Rocky training camp. You want to send little Mikey, little Paul up into the mountains with the team. And we say to the team, you all teach me your skills. So if I don't want Kopi on the mic anymore, how can I get Kopi to teach little Paul how to do the things I need to do for myself? And it ties in lovely to the conversation we had before about kids. So what do? Well, I go back to being the parent to me that I would have had in an ideal world. So I get little shy Paul up onto the stage and I say to him over time, come on, we don't need Kopi for this anymore. Let's retire Kopi. We keep them all as consultants because they're all part of us. We learn how to love all of them for what they've done for us. And we say, teach me how to do it. And Kopi says, right, well, if you want to do karaoke, what you need to do is, you'll be nervous, but just get up and stand on all the stuff we talked about before. And over time, now little Paul can sing karaoke sober. I don't need Kopi to do it for me anymore. So guess what? I don't need alcohol anymore. I might like a drink sometimes, but I have a drink because I want a drink, not because I need a drink. And we do that with all of our darkest characters. We understand why we created them. We understand what they did for us. We learn how to love them truly and deeply. And then they retire. And we learn how to look after ourselves from us, from the real version of us.
Wow. So that was like Inception. So many layers to this, because I suppose for me, first of all, I stayed on that bit where it's building them characters and you've got the mic, and now I know a Mikey is that extroverted, giving everyone a hug, having fun character, which I like the most out of the characters to bring out to the audience. But then I have got like rhythmical Mike, which is more the performer, a bit more serious, mental health side. And all these people, I've built characters over time. But you're saying, you know, there's also more building upon this, because as you build these characters and you let them have an understanding of who they are and a self-awareness of each character, you do eventually come to this true self, the authentic self, the real self, your organic self. And that's who you therefore become, because of you've learned all the traits of all these different characters, and they go into one eventually. Is that correct?
Effectively, yeah.
That's yeah, that is absolutely incredible. Because yeah, for a lot of people, again, it's not called this anymore, is it? But it's multiple personality disorder, we used to call it. And the reason a lot of people would shy away from this idea or theory is because we see it as a disorder and it's an illness and it's bad for you. But it's a real thing. It's clearly there. We have some days I'm hungry, so I'm a different person. I've got these traits. Some days I've had the best day of my life and I'm very different and I've got these traits showing. So there's always an array of traits in lots of different people. And you've built up a program where you give them all names and characters and traits. The traits become the characters. But you're saying you experience and have time with all of these people and learn to control them. So you bring them into certain situations and settings, and then over time you realize who you enjoy the most, how you enjoy the most being, and then you take away all them different traits and implement them in one character, even the bad traits that you learn to deal with. I feel it's such a deep topic. I really want to try and condense it down, but is it possible to do that, or is it just a lot of
really
depth?
difficult. You've done a good job of it. It's really difficult to condense it down. That's in a nutshell what it is. It's about identifying who we are, so that we can then reunite everyone together into the true whole person. So loads of this work originates from the psychologist Carl Jung, and he's got a quote that's in my book which I love, which is, "I'd rather be whole than good." Because what we're taught when we're children is to be good.
Yeah.
And what that means is, subconsciously, be good at the exclusion of being bad. So cut off all the bad parts, in inverted commas, of you. Well, actually, what that leads to is all of this splitting, all of this adaptation, all of these different parts. Well, actually, when we can learn to be whole again, we can accept ourselves for all of our goodness and all of our badness. Now, a question I often get is, well, if I accept all of these dark sides of me, don't they then just come out more? We repress them for a reason. And I use the word counterintuitive constantly, because it is counterintuitive. It's like we were saying before about repressing negative emotions, in inverted commas. Again, I don't call them negative emotions anymore. I say they're misunderstood. Because the whole thing is, once we accept these parts of us and we understand them and we see them for what they are, we don't need them anymore. So let me give you one of the darkest examples in my life. I used to suffer from rage, outbursts of rage. It was common in my family. One of the biggest problems with rage is we don't call it rage, we call it anger. So there are times in my life when I've thrown a glass at a wall during an argument, I've smashed a guitar, I've punched a wall and broken my own hand, because things would build up over time and then this explosion would happen. When I started looking at this, I named that character of mine Bane, like the character out of the Batman movies. And when I explored Bane, one of the great things about this, once you get into it, and I love talking about this bit, because if me now was talking to me from 5 years ago, me from 5 years ago would be saying to me, "You've gone mad, mate. Like you have lost your mind." Like, imagine if I time traveled back, he would be saying to me, "I don't know what happens between me now and you in 5 years to cause this. You need to go to hospital. Like, you've gone nuts." Because I get that. Like, it sounds nuts before you start getting into it, but the more you get into it, actually, the more it makes sense. So I started. One of the reasons it's good to name these people, and this is something I've learned from other people and built on. One of the great reasons to name them is you can talk to them. So I would say to Bane, I'll still do this now. Before I go to sleep at night, I'll ask my subconscious a question, and you'd be amazed how often you wake up with the answer, because your subconscious works on it overnight. And I would say to Bane, "But why? Like, you on the surface are a destructive character. You just caused problems." And he would say to me, "Think about it. I existed because you never dealt with your anger properly. You were a people pleaser. You never said what you wanted to say. You would constantly be biting your lip, trying to please other people. So think about the mic passing down through all the characters. I need to express my anger. It's a healthy emotion. None of my other characters do it for me. They just keep passing the mic. The fun-loving ones, not interested in dealing with shit like that. They keep passing it down. Eventually, I have to get this out my system or it's going to kill me. It gets to this character I've created, Bane, and he throws a glass at a wall. And I said to him, but what's the point in that? And he goes, well, you get to express your anger properly, don't you? And I say to him, but it's unhealthy. And he goes to me, I didn't say it was a good solution. I was created because no other fucker would deal with it. If you want a better solution to this, you deal with it. And I said to him, well, but how do I deal with it? And he says, you just sort out your anger. You learn how to process your anger. The mic never gets passed down far enough to reach me. So what I started to learn how to do then was, how do I properly process my own anger? Healthy anger. Anger is a perfectly healthy emotion. But I was taught as a kid, don't be angry. So I would repress it. So now I'm more assertive. If something pisses me off, I'll say it, because I care less about what people think of me. In the past, once you get deep into this, it's like loads of us have been raised to be people pleasers. So we don't say what we really mean because we're worried what people think of us. Once you can get to the point of going, I'm just going to be myself, and this takes a lot of work. I'm just going to be myself and say what I think. And if that means me being assertive and expressing my anger, literally sometimes saying, this really pisses me off and I'm not happy. And you see people react like, oh God, we're not used to you being like this.
Yes.
But guess what that does? Bane never needs to come on the mic anymore, because he was only created because I didn't look after my own anger properly. I didn't express my own anger. So now he's just a guy who knocks around in his retirement home.
This is good. I'm getting into the meat of it now. I feel I don't say I fully understand it, because I know there's so much more behind all this, and that's why I need to get that book, man. I'm really excited about this chapter. But what you just said then, give me that. Do you know where it goes in your gut and you go, oh, I'm starting to feel this. I'm starting to really feel this.
Yeah.
And I suppose where it is a disorder, or it's become unhealthy for people, is where they don't get to put the mic forward and one person be there at a time. It's where like 4 of the characters there at the same time, and they're all just talking over each other and getting confused. So it's about really in that moment being reflective, thinking about what that moment warrants and who would best be there for that moment when you're first picking these characters and learning to bring them into your day-to-day life. It's being right, it's your turn now, and like I think you said before, the mic can be switched around quite quickly. It can be this person, this person, this person, but it never needs to be all 3 at the same time. That's a confused speech then, isn't it?
Yeah. So when you said before, and it's a perfect point to make, multiple personality disorder, and that's why what worries people with this, it's like,
Yeah,
have I got multiple personality disorder? And you're like, no. The problem with it is, when we say multiple personality disorder, we think, the way we say it, we think the disorder is having multiple personalities, but it's not. We've all got multiple personalities. The disorder is when they become unhinged.
yes,
And they only become unhinged. Again, it feels counterintuitive to begin with, but once you start working on it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. They only become unhinged the more we ignore this. So if we ignore it and just leave it, and the more and more trauma we have in life, then all of a sudden you've got these characters with the mic going crazy, and they're dominating your life. The destructive characters are more likely to come in. So the first step is, identify them. Second step, start to learn how to consciously decide who goes on the mic. And the third step, in very rough terms, is what you said before. Then we get to the point where we integrate them. So it's not even multiple characters anymore. I'm just dealing with my own stuff myself as the real version of me. And they're still there. This is the thing. We don't want to deny any parts of us, because that's all part of the low self-worth. That's all part of that I'm not good enough. There is a part of me, and I'm perfectly comfortable with it, there is a part of me capable of rage. Goes back to what you were saying before about the line between good and evil. There is a part of me, I am comfortable with the fact there is a part of me capable of evil. There is a part of all of us capable of evil. And the way you deal with that is to be aware of it and to know what you need to do to make sure that never comes out.
Wow.
By repressing it, it doesn't help. By repressing it only makes it more likely to come out. Bane came out way more when I repressed him and denied him than since I've said, I see you, I see you, I get you.
Just because I think a lot of my audience that I've noticed I'm 27, young men, and one of the factors is often rage. I suppose, you could relate that to toxic masculinity, mainly being told to repress, 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 don't feel, boy, don't feel, repress.
Yeah.
So that's just something between a lot of us. I'm very bad with that. My job now is a filmmaker. It is an SD card, I can show you. So some days I've lost everything I've done on a day because this has gone corrupt. Like, can you imagine that feeling of, they've put all this time in. So some things have been, you can't retrieve it. One day I went to Chatsworth House and I filmed an Olympian horse rider. Really excited, so cool, all going. Took all my gear. I even took my gimbals there, my drone, everything you can imagine. Get there. The one thing I forgot to take that day, I was all Billy Big Bollocks thinking I know what I'm doing, was all of these SD cards. So not one came with me. Now, I sweated. I panicked. I know I can't get home. I ran around Chatsworth. Does anyone know where to go? So there's silly boy Mikey, who would have been at school, stands there. I'm Basil Fawlty, and the whole time I'm just running about like, Manuel, where are you? And so what I did in this time, which I laugh a lot about now, but I just pretended I was all good and it was good to go. And I'm like making jokes. I'm saying, oh yeah, I've got you good angle. Yeah, you look great. Oh, smashing. Let's just put that mic on properly and just absolutely knowing in my head, nothing matters. I'm just bollocks the whole day up. Can't come back, can't tell them, can't admit to it. I probably could have at the time and it would have been better because they would have had a product out of it, or they could have at least made a decision of what they wanted to do. But I wasn't aware to these characters. So I'm just flapping. They're all saying stuff to each other like, Mikey, you fucking idiot. Oh my God, what you done? Oh, well, it doesn't really matter. Everything's all there at once. So the rage, Mikey, is very real as well. But that's, let's say, I've not named him yet, but let's call him Barry. So Barry gets home and yeah, I'm smashing stuff up. I'm an idiot. I'm just punching walls. It could, I don't want my partner to ever see that. Luckily, my daughter's not been born by this time and he's not had to come out for a while. But for these people, I just want you to reiterate that the rage side, because I'm very interested in that for self, and how, say, something as gravitas as losing a whole day's work, not be retrievable, you're not having that again. You're going to get pissed off. You're going to be angry. And it's a natural feeling to feel. Can you just reiterate again how you come to terms with that, how you talk to Barry and how you have that conversation again? I just think I wanted to hear it a bit more in depth. And again.
So I'll give you two sides. So I'll give you some practical stuff, which can really help. And then I'll give you the important thing to acknowledge about anger and rage, and even knowing that they're two different things. Because what we have at the moment is a society in which we call it all anger. So when you have that explosion, when I throw something at a wall or punch a wall or you smash things up, people say, see, anger. And that's why it's bad. And therefore it creates this vicious cycle of anger's bad, repress it. So first thing we want to do is get away from calling that expression anger. It's not, it's rage. And what I always say is rage is the unhealthy manifestation of repressed anger. So think about anger like a bucket and it's filling up with water. Every time you repress your anger or suppress your anger, it slowly fills up. And this is why, for anyone who's experienced rage, you will have experienced this. It can be the smallest thing that sets you off. Because what's happening is that bucket is filling with water every time you repress. And it might take 2,000 things to happen. But when it's full, whatever the next thing to happen is that makes it overflow, that's when rage comes out. So that's when your rage character gets on the mic and he just needs to let it out. So that's what's happening in practical terms. What we want to do to resolve it is figure out practically how to stop the bucket filling up, how to let the real version of us deal with our anger healthily. So the first thing to do is say, when I feel angry, it's okay. Forget what I was taught as a kid. It's okay to be angry. It's a healthy emotion. It's actually, if it wasn't for, I always say to people, if it wasn't for anger and fear, we wouldn't have survived as a human race. They're the two emotions that have kept us alive. And yet we've got the cheek to call them negative and to try and repress them. We wouldn't have the opportunity to feel love and joy and happiness if fear and anger hadn't kept us alive all these generations. Think about being attacked by a lion in the jungle. I love telling this version of it. You get attacked by a lion in the jungle. If the feelings you feel in that moment are joy and love, you're dead. In that moment, they are negative emotions to feel. And that's why I don't talk about negative and positive emotions. In that moment, the most positive emotions you can feel are fear and anger. Why? They're going to keep you alive. So we need to get away from looking at them as negative emotions.
Yeah.
Anger is just they're all neutral. It's the stories we tell ourselves about them that makes them negative. So anger, first and foremost, perfectly healthy emotion. So once we start identifying that, it's like, okay, well, when I feel angry, how can I deal with it? The outward external thing we can do, which we don't need to do, but sometimes it's necessary, is to express it, is to say to people, I feel angry. I feel it. I would say it out loud, because even just saying it out loud allows your brain to go, yeah, okay. It's okay to feel angry. I feel angry right now. I am pissed off. I am annoyed. I am whatever it is, whatever your language is for it, say it. Then there's two big things that you can do. One is free writing. So sit down with a pen on paper, not typing. It works better with pen or pencil on paper, and write out everything you feel. Do not hold back. So if you're furious with yourself or you're furious with someone else, get it all out. Swearing, abuse, this is not for anybody else to see. This is for you to process it. You do it on loose paper so you can burn it afterwards if you need to, because you don't want anyone to see it. This is pure processing of emotion. I do this whenever I feel things building up, and you can feel it in your chest, like the real build up. Whatever it is, sit down. I can write pages and pages, and you'll notice even your handwriting changes because it's aggressive. It's that aggression coming out of you. That's a great way to do it. Whatever it is, whatever you want to say, get it out. Another one, which I've only developed in the past 6 months, but I've started sharing with people and they like it, and it really works for me. Again, it goes back to being kids. Think about when kids need to just go back. This is where it all comes together. It's like Karate Kid training. Think about what emotions are. So anger is just a chemical reaction inside your body. Guess what? You need to release it. You need to release the energy. What will kids do when they need to release energy? They go and run around the garden, they scream, they shout. Guess what? As adults, we don't do that anymore. We repress that even. So something I do in my own life and I recommend to others. And again, this is on the surface, seems like you're a lunatic, but it's brilliant. So pick the geographical location for this carefully. I like to stay in houses. I move around a lot. I like to stay in houses that are detached so nobody can hear me. Or if you haven't got that benefit, go in a car and drive out onto the motorway or somewhere quiet where no one can hear you. There's another one. I think I robbed this from an old film without realizing it. There's it's a proper cheesy American comedy. Paul Rudd and another guy called I Love You Man, and they go to, this guy teaches this other guy this. They go to the pier in San Francisco that's full of sea lions making loads of noise, and they stand underneath there. And the point is, you want to be somewhere where you can just let rip. So if it's not enough writing stuff down, which sometimes I found it's not, just go somewhere you can scream at the top of your voice. And if that doesn't work, picture whoever it is you're annoyed with and scream at them. Get it all out. Say what you want to say. Because something that, again, traditional self-help world, loads of them will say you need to go and tell a person. If it's a person you're pissed off with, go and tell them. The problem with that is, think about any argument you've ever had where you've let rip with what you really think. Actually, as soon as you've finished, you're like, oh, that felt better getting off my chest. But guess what? Now you've got to deal with how they react.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you immediately go from rage character to shame character. Because now you're looking at them and you've hurt their feelings. And they're distraught. And now you feel like the bad guy. Guess what? If you have that same conversation with them not in the room, you get all the benefits and none of the downside. So I will often, if something's built up and someone's pissed me off, I will stand in a room by myself and I'll scream at that person when they're not there. And I'll say everything I want to say. You're an effing this, and you're a C-bomb, and you're a blah, 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 blah. And the way you treated me was a disgrace. Don't hold anything back. None of this reasonableness. No other character on the mic. No like compassion. No good guy. All of the horrible stuff. Let it out. Let it free flow. And guess what happens? Again, counterintuitively. Once it's out, you get to the point where your whole shoulder, your whole body goes, ah. It's like when a kid has run around for ages and then just falls asleep. What I find is once you've processed all of that emotion, whether it's writing, whether it's screaming, whether it's shouting, however you process it, it clears it. And then it allows space for the next thing to come in. And what usually comes in after that is the compassion and the love and the, actually, now I can see it wasn't that person's fault. It was, now we can go into the take responsibility. How could I have changed things?
Does it still work if it's self though? Do you know, if you're in the room, and because I've made that mistake because of the SD cards, and say if I see myself as a failure because I keep making failures, or a mistake because I've been told before I'm a mistake, so if I keep making mistakes, thus I am a mistake, and you go for that run and you're like, you're a fucking idiot, Mike, or whatever, you fucking this and fucking that, you're still with you, so you're having that conversation in your own head sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Does it?
So this is the way I'd suggest. This is a really good question. No one's asked me that question before. So this is what I'd suggest you do, and this is where the multiple personalities are important. Identify before you do it which of your personalities you're annoyed with.
Yeah, it could be like Timmy, who's timid and like sad at himself, sad boy Timmy.
Yeah, or it could be the one that's forgetful.
Yeah, that
always forgetting stuff. And you just want to kick off on the one who's always forgetting stuff. So kick off on him. Pretend he's standing in front of you. Do all the things we've just said, like in that way, but not about you as a whole, not about the real you, about that version of you.
You're then once brilliant, you are.
Then once it's processed, then we come back. Because this is the bit of the work where most of the personal development and self-help world leaves out. They want you to jump straight to compassion and straight to forgiveness and straight to, but you are good enough. That part of you deserves love. Couldn't agree more. There's no point telling yourself that before you've processed the anger, because all you're doing it without realizing it is suppressing the anger.
Yeah.
So let the anger out first, and then we can move on to, okay, did he mean to do it? No. Why did he do it? In what way? And this is a huge part of the work I do, taking responsibility. Well, in what way could I, little Mikey, real me, in what way could I have stopped forgetful Mikey forgetting all the SD cards? Well, I can take responsibility. And actually, I should have a checklist. And I don't leave the house until my checklist is ticked. Or I make sure before I go anywhere, there's an emergency supply somewhere, or whatever it is, in whatever aspect of your life. A huge part of this work is taking responsibility. So we come back to us all the time, the real us. Okay, if I don't want to be rage, Bane, throwing things at walls, what do I need to do to stop that happening in the future? I don't need to like that part of me. I need to love that part of me. I need to be grateful for what he did. So I'm grateful. I'll give you a powerful one probably to wrap up on. When I had that conversation with Bane, I said to him, but it's ridiculous, mate. Like, you were so destructive in my life. How can I possibly love you? He said to me, and this all came to me like literally subconsciously. He said to me, what you're working on the basis of is that if I didn't exist, life would be better without me. And that's something we all do. We all assume that without these parts of our character, life would be better. What we never take into account is life could be worse. And he said to me, there was another character waiting in the wings if I didn't do what I did to let out this stuff. And I said, who? He said, the one who wanted to kill you. So if I didn't let out all this rage, you wouldn't even be here.
I nearly cried then.
I did.
Wow.
I was like, shit. So I went from, I hate this part of me, to I couldn't be more grateful to him because he saved my life. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that part of me. processing that stuff that I couldn't do. I created him, remember? I created this guy to do this stuff for me. And then I've got the cheek to hate him. And he saved my life. So now I'm like, mate, thank you. And you know what? From now on, I'm a grown up. It's on me. This is on me, not on you.
Wow. I mean, to end the podcast, that is the best way to possibly end that. Because people up to this marker, up to this point, I just want to say, Paul, thank you so much for everything you've just explained and where you've taken me to there. That was an emotional journey, and I've left on this very high emotional state, and I'm going to go away with that now, and channel that and speak about you to everyone I know. Just remind people the book again, because I feel if people have got to this state of the podcast now and you just said that, they want that book. So just remind them where they can get it and what the book's called.
It's on Amazon. It's called How to Solve Any Problem in Life. So if you search that title with my name, it should come up. You can also get the first 4 chapters for free, completely free. So if you go to my website, which is paul7cope.com/free chapters, you can download the first 4 chapters for free. So you can either listen to them or read them, and have a test of it before you buy it if you're interested.
I mean, they've had a fair amount today. They know what they're in for. Honestly, man, I've had self-help conversations before. I've had therapy before. Some people are brilliant. Some people are just speaking the jargon. So they say the right words in the right places, but it feels contrived. It feels saturated. You are genuinely authentic, and I know when somebody, I can see in their eyes, I can hear in their voice, everything. You just want to help people. That is your mission. And I absolutely adore you from the bottom of my heart for coming on today, speaking your truth, being you. I just want to thank you so much. I really do appreciate that, man. You're a phenomenal human being, and thank God you exist. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. That's very very kind of you to say, and it's my pleasure. I've loved speaking to you.
It has been fantastic. Let me say goodbye to these guys. Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back at the Bus Sessions podcast. Remember what I say to you. I'm going to leave you on this forevermore. Just be nice to one another, you beautiful buggers. That's all you got to do. Just be nice. Very simple. See you later. Cheers, my man.